Test, test. There we go. Yeah, I don't know why my default device was not showing. You should hear me now, right? Sweet. And just in time for the raid. Woohoo. Alright. You should also be able to hear music, hopefully. C# Fritz is here. Hi. Alright, people. Let me close all this stuff and let me just reiterate what I was just saying for people that just showed up. We're working on a ASP.NET Core website, and in that ASP.NET Core website we are basically creating a web application that members can join, and when they join they have access to videos that have previously been recorded and uploaded to the site, and then each video has a bunch of questions and answers. It's a Q&A session essentially, and so there's also an associated text file that's going to have those questions in them. And eventually it's going to have timestamps that you could be able to click into and be able to jump right to that spot in the video to see whatever question it was you were interested in hearing about. Right now, in the interest of being quick and easy, what it does is it uses entities directly inside of its code to work on things. So let's look for an example of that somewhere. Well, for one thing, it's using the data context directly inside of the back end. You know, I'm not using controllers in this case, it's using Razor pages. Hey Rambling Geek, hey Carapayet, thank you. Thanks folks for the follows. Open Window 365 and a couple others, I appreciate it. I'm not as I don't have quite as cool a setup as C# Fritz with my stream. Thanks for the follow, VRL Shadow. So I appreciate you guys following. I'm going to focus more on writing the code and talking through what my thought process is on that, and won't have quite as many bells and whistles on the stream. But thanks Stelzy79, and I will try not to get totally distracted by the chat, although that sometimes is hard with 100 people in there. Rambling Geek, hi. Alright, so let me see if I can find... These are all just generated files, by the way. So these things that do CRUD operations on these videos, I just created these previously with add scaffolded item and told it to just create them. So they aren't exactly as clean as I would like. Thanks for the follow, Naked Flame. But I didn't have to write this code, is the beauty of it. So it just created this all for me. But then eventually I'm going to want to clean it up. And specifically, something I'm going to want to clean up is the fact that I'm using the entities directly in here. I think, somewhere. I don't know. I created this issue to fix this, so it must be there somewhere. Let's see. What's my... Yeah, okay, here. So, for instance, this is using archive video. Archive video, if you look at the pop-up, is coming from my core project. So it's part of my domain model. And as a best practice, you don't necessarily want to share your domain model directly with the UI project in your application. There's a few reasons for that. You can just say, like, academically, you know, you've got separation of concerns where you don't want the domain model to be, you know, up there in the UI level. This is a different responsibility. Thanks for the follow, NMKTV. But there can also be security issues. For instance, I don't think I've seen one here, but I've definitely seen it in client code where where's a post of this? There's this post, but they're not... Oh, I know what's going on. It's right here. Okay, I'm not used to Razor pages. So when this thing posts, it's posting an archive video, right? What's going to happen is this method, if it were an MVC controller, what you'd see is something like this: archive video model, right? Something like that. But because it's a Razor page, what it's actually doing is it's going to bind to a property, so it doesn't have to put this inside of the action method. So we get rid of this parameter, but we have this property up here that we're working with. And so that's what it's messing with right here, where it attaches that entity. Mazel95, thanks for the follow. All right, so here's the issue. We're going to do model binding on archive video. Let's look at what the page actually looks like that does this. So let me run this thing. So is the property applied? Yeah, Rambling Geek. That property is available for all methods except for gets, right? If it does a get request, then the model binding won't happen. But if it's a post or a put or a delete, then the model binding takes place. All right, so I need to log in, and hopefully that account works. And then we'll go to the videos, and I need to be an administrator, so I logged in as the wrong person. Hang on. Log in. Admin at test.com. Log in with that. Okay, so now we can go to the videos. We can edit this thing. So we'll edit, or even better, we'll create a new one. All right, so I'm going to bring up DevTools for a second. We're going to look at the network while this is happening. And so we're going to create a new one called foo bar 5119, whatever. And we will create this. Alright, and then somewhere in here is our post, right? So right here, we did a post, and we put in this data, right? So that's exactly the data that we just said we wanted to post. Now, in this case, I don't really have anything that's sensitive about this, so it's not a huge deal. But here's where you want to be very careful about posting. Scroll up where? Did I go past something? You want to be very careful about model binding an entity, because maybe there's things that weren't on the form that I don't necessarily want to share, but a malicious user could discover them. So here's an example. Let's go look at my model for a moment. And let's say I've got this video, this archive video here, and I could have some kind of a sensitive thing in here, like is private. Let's just say. Okay, so now is private. Let's say it always defaults to true. There's that. Okay, so now by default every video that gets pushed up is going to be private. But then I could come into here, and I could take this post URL and this posted data here, and even if the form doesn't have is private, I could add it here, right? I could say archivevideo.isPrivate, and it'll just work, right? Model binding will automatically set that property for me, and everything will be fine. Now that doesn't sound too awful, right? Okay, great. They added a video and they're able to make it public. Okay, what's the big deal? All right. Well, what if, in addition to that, this also had something like, application user, let's say author, right? And I don't think I have an application user right now, but just bear with me for a moment. And then maybe this application user, let's do this, public class application user. And let's say I've got a really trivial security model, right, where I have a public bool is admin. Okay, so there's that. Lemon314, thanks for the follow. All right, here's the thing. When I post this thing, I've got this author, and I've got, yeah, that can't be true anymore. All right, I've got this author. When I post this, I can come in here and I can modify that using a tool like Postman. And I can set whatever, dot author dot whatever. So test. That's annoying that I have to always set those up. All right, so let's create a request in here. So I'm going to take this request. Can I copy it? I think I can do a copy as curl. Come over here and then import from text. Curl import, and if that works, then there's all that. There's my body. Right. So there's my request. Right. Now, what if I go in here and I'm a hacker? And of course, I would automate all this. I wouldn't be doing it by trial and error, but I'd say something like archivevideo.author.isAdmin true. Okay. So I can just send that, and it's going to blow up right now because I haven't actually, authenticated and all that other stuff, but there's nothing that prevents me from using this to navigate that entity structure. Any navigation properties it has and go and just try things. Go try and see if there's an author or a user or an owner or whatever. See if it has an isAdmin. And I can totally script this and run through all kinds of stuff. And as soon as I find one that works, then I've hacked your site. Right? I've elevated myself to admin just because I was able to post an entity to some endpoint. All right, so that's why I want to change from using entities in the UI layer, right? Because the model binding is so easy to just jump through whatever properties. All right, so that's the background. Let's talk about actually doing it now. So I've got this API model here, and don't need that one, but I'm going to create a new public class archive video DTO. This is going to be my view model. I sometimes call it an API model or a binding model. It's what I want model binding to bind against. Now in this case, I literally do want it to be this, which is fine. And so I'll paste it there. And then these display values and things, those don't really ever belong in my domain model anyway. So I only added them there because I was moving fast and I was just generating that code. But I can take this, I can do control dot and move it to its own CS file. And while I'm here, we'll clean this up. Alright, and then we can jump back to, let's say, the create method. And instead of model binding to archive video, we're going to model bind to archive video DTO. And we'll call this model just because. Okay, so that means I need to change over here. That's all good. Let's see. Do a quick replace. And I'm not sure I like this naming approach, but I'm just trying it here. I may come back and adjust that later. I don't like that. Archive video, okay. Alright, so then let's look at this code behind. That'll need a namespace. Let's control dot again to bring that up real quick. We called this model. That'll be good there. Okay. So this is still using the DB context directly. Eventually I might want to use a repository or some other abstraction. But for now I'm okay to keep using it. The thing here is I can't just add my DTO directly. I need to add the actual model type. So here is where I'm going to explicitly say what things I want off the DTO to go into the model. And eventually I'll probably want to use a tool like AutoMapper because that's going to save me a lot of time. If I'm just doing it once, I'll do it by hand. And once I do it twice, I'll copy paste it. When I get to the third time for repetition, that's when I'll look at a more generalized solution typically. So it's kind of my 3 strikes rule for repetition and stuff. Alright, so I need to just new up var, we'll call it video entity equals new archive video. And I just want to copy paste the things from my model to this thing. So let's just do it inline. Alright, and so it has date created equals avm.avtmr, thank you for the follow. That, and then control space. We don't need an ID or questions. We do need show notes title and video URL. So we need this equals avm. If you just do the first letter in uppercase for these, it's a quick way to jump to a particular variable name. If you're in Visual Studio or VS Code, I think VS Code supports it too usually. So avm tab dot show notes, and then I'm control spacing to pull this up. Title equals avm dot title, and then video URL equals avm dot video URL. Alright, so the benefit of this, even though it required a little bit more code, is that now there's no possible way, even if this archive video has sensitive properties on it, like who the author is, or are they admin, or is it private, there's no way for the person posting the code to ever get to it. Right? This is the gatekeeper, and I control this code. Hugo Dahl, you're asking, with AutoMapper, do you explicitly map each field manually or let it do its thing? You're not asking what it supports. It sounds like you already know. So yeah, it can just do left-hand, right-hand copying. And if I know that my DTO doesn't expose anything I don't want it to expose, which is typically what I'll do, right? This DTO, for now, this seems like a general purpose DTO, but in a real project, and eventually what I would do is I would have a create DTO. It would only have the fields that I need when someone creates an item. And I would have an update DTO, which would only have the fields that you can update on the update page, right? So each DTO is tightly coupled to and specific to the form that it works with, so it only has the properties that it should have. And when that's true, there's no downside to just telling AutoMapper to do its thing, its default behavior, which will map every property that matches name by name. So it would do all this automatically for me, right? And we'll probably get to that. I may have time to pull in AutoMapper today. But now that I have this new entity, I'm going to use that for the add method here. And then I should be able to save and run this, and it should work. All right, let me catch up on some more comments. Okay. We can't see it behind your video. Oh, sorry. I got you. My face was in the way of it. Okay. Good. Hopefully I got what you needed. Kron Kriz, can I find this project from the start on VODs? It's on my YouTube. So the video on demand, I think, is what you're asking about. Twitch only holds them for 30 days or 28 days. So my YouTube has them. And I can pull that up real quick here. YouTube.com /Ardalis, I think. So this one's one here, whopping 65 views. Was the last time I think I worked on this dev better. One over here, 50 views from a month ago, and these two were also that one. So I think that's your question. What else we got? With AutoMapper, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Ancient Coder. AutoMapper's convention-based, right? Hadn't thought of per action DTO. That makes a lot of sense. Yep, cool. Yeah, when you do a per action DTO, the other thing is if you are using razor pages, like I'm doing here, there's absolutely no reason, if I have a DTO that's only going to be used by this razor page, it can totally just be in this page, right? I can take my archive video DTO here, and I can make it be the create DTO, and it can just go like right here, right? And it's gonna be like, you know, create archive video DTO, right? And now it's in the create page, you know, the code behind, so it's very obvious that this goes with it, and everything else still works, right? As soon as I control that in this annotation and this annotation, right? And so this makes it very clear where that is. I think you can even make these protected because they're not used anywhere at this point besides in here, and then you're good. So the nice thing about razor pages is that all this stuff is grouped together, so you don't end up with, I've got a controllers folder, and I've got a views folder, and I've got a view models folder, and I've got a models folder, and you end up scrolling constantly all through here trying to find the right folder for things. It's really tedious. So you could also do this. I'm not going to do that right this second, because I want to test this other thing, but that's something that's commonly done too. Alright, so let me just verify. I don't actually have unit tests on the page currently. But if I can create a new object, test, another test, 4219. I've got really good validation on my URLs. It worked, right? So it created it. You can see over here, it did its thing. It used appdb context, blah, blah, blah. It's just doing it in memory at the moment. But it did actually attach to the DB context and do all that stuff correctly. And then it was able to read it, and you can see all the data came back out. So if we look at details, we should see the show notes right there. All right. So I want to repeat that a few times. And one thing you can do, let's see, one thing to look for, I should point out, in your DTO here, is you want to make sure that you don't have a reference to your domain model. Because a very common thing that you'll do, especially when you have a complex, you know, even marginally complex object graph, is that you'll sometimes accidentally include some domain model stuff with your DTO. So for instance, this archive video DTO goes along with this archive video entity, And you'll notice I didn't pull in the questions because I didn't need it at this point. But if I had, it would have been really easy for me to have this collection sitting here, and this would have required a couple of namespaces. But then I could go and look at my DTO, and I could see right here that, oh, I'm referencing my domain class in my DTO. That should be a red flag. That should jump out at me and say, hey, don't do that. You want to make sure that this in your UI layer is, if you need it at all, is some kind of question DTO and not the actual question entity, because again, model binding might go and pull stuff onto this that you don't want to expose. All right, in this case I don't need that, so we'll just get rid of it again. But I do want to point that out. Ancient Coder, when you have a big project and end with lots of DTOs and few models, Razor Pages wins over MVC. Yeah, I would agree with that. If you do MVC, it's a good idea for you to check out feature folders. I have an MSDN article on that, but Razor Pages basically is feature folders. Right? It's like everything I need to know about archive videos is in this folder. I've got the model, I've got the view, I've got the action methods, if you will. In this case, they're handlers, but they're the same thing as action methods. It's all right here. So as I work on this feature of managing the CRUD operations on these videos, I don't have to jump around to different places. Everything is right here. It's either in the Razor file here or it's in this code behind. And that's another reason why I would probably take this API model and move it down into here, because as it stands here, it's not really cohesive, right? It's kind of in the wrong place. In fact, I'm going to just go ahead and do that. I'm going to put that right here for now. Sort of web API models, that can be web pages, archived videos. And you should be able to see that, right? Can't see your... Oh, the chat... What? Really? Oh. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me fix that. I switched up which display I was using. Now I see why you guys are seeing problems. Let's see. That should be way better, shouldn't it? Alright, did that just update live where you can see it? So what happened is I switched out video cards, or it's a long story, but what ended up happening is the two monitors got swapped left to right, and instead of me fixing that, I just changed the thing in OBS. So like here's my OBS, which is what I'm using to stream, and I just toggled whether it was the left or the right display I was showing, and I didn't realize that they were different. They were sized differently. So it's what I get for not unit testing my streaming. Alright, so now everything's a little bit smaller, but hopefully you can see the screen better. And that also explains why you couldn't see the bottom of my Chrome DevTools when I was showing you stuff. So that was way over here. So look, now you can see what I was trying to show you before was that. And now you can see it. Alright, cool. Alright. Where was I? This was not finding it. I put this in the right namespace. Pages, archive videos, right? And so this should totally be able to see this. And it's complaining. Cheering me, Perry at DigitalOX. DigitalOx? Thank you. Awesome, appreciate it. We can see. Alright. Alright, tell me why this is not working. Typer namespace, archive video could not be found. Are videos stored in a database or static folder? Videos are not stored anywhere yet. That's how far along I am with this. I have a GitHub issue. If you guys want to see this is actually out there. It's DevBetterWeb under github.com/Ardalis. In fact, let's just go show you a list of issues and post that in chat. And so one of them, you'll see that I opened up last October and haven't gotten there yet, is decide where to host the video content and the metadata. So the site's actually live in Azure. It's for a team mentoring service that I do with about a dozen people at the moment. And it looks like this. This is the actual site. But it is hosted out in Azure at devbetter.com. It just doesn't have those video links and login and register things there yet. I haven't deployed the changes I'm working on. But the videos, there are archived videos, but currently they're just in a Dropbox share. And so the goal is, this is on Azure. The goal is to put them in probably Azure. I don't know for sure yet. That's what this issue is all about. Is do I put them in Azure Blob Storage or S3 or leave them in Dropbox? And then do I store the metadata in with the files or in a SQL database or what? So right now I'm kind of assuming that the metadata, which will be like the title and summary and stuff like that, the date it was created. Right now I'm assuming that's all going to go in the SQL database. So that's what this archived video model is. Right? This is that metadata that I'm talking about. All right. Let's return to the crazy question, why this is not being found. I don't have any other errors. All I did was move this thing. It's public. It's in the same namespace. Copy that namespace. Oh, it's not the same namespace. Look at that. Clean architecture. That's why. Alright, so this is a relic of when I started this thing from the template, the clean architecture template. Which I should mention. So, alright, if you want to build something that's got this architecture in place, you can go out to github.com, not just github.com, /Ardalis. And I can't type. There. And this clean architecture repository is basically a starting point architecture for if you want to just do file new ASP.NET Core solution and have it broken up into, you know, these core infrastructure and web projects along with tests. This will get you started. Mead of Enam. I store content type in Azure Blob metadata, title, size, path, etc. in SQL. Okay, that sounds like what I'm saying. You can put the, you store content type in blob metadata. Do blobs have a content type property that I can store random stuff in? I'm not familiar with that. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's interesting. Alright, so now we should be able to build. That worked. Okay. So now I'm happier I don't need this API models, and in fact, I don't even think I need this at all anymore. I think I can get rid of it. So let's just delete this to-do controller. This is stuff that came over with the clean architecture starter, and I don't really need it. So let's just nuke those. That'll keep me from being tempted to put more stuff in that folder. Oh, I do have an API. Okay. Yeah, I don't really want that either. Delete. Eventually I might need an API again, but I can always create it again. Cool. And while we're at it, let's get rid of that to-do item. And that'll probably break some tests. Some events. Sorry for the dinging. Hopefully it's not too loud. Still not to the tests. Right, I don't need that. Thank you, Visual Studio, for warning me every time. Alright, so if that, then that. I don't need any of this. That's going away. I already have a different seed method I'm using now. Hey, thank you for the follow. James. Sorry, that's hard to say and it disappeared. Alright, we're going to do a commit here in a second, or a pull request. As soon as we finish ripping out the to-do item stuff I don't need anymore. Right, that whole test can go away. And To-do item builder doesn't need to be there anymore. I may use that pattern, but I can always pull that code again if I need it. Mead of Enum. Do you have more information you can share with me about your Azure Blob metadata? Because I'm not familiar with that. To-do razor page. I don't need that. That can go away. Just make sure I don't need this either. Nope, don't need that. Alright. Why is that even coming up? This is a generated file. Let's try and clean, see if that gets rid of it. Alright, that's just weird. Let's try this. Alright, so in Obj debug razor views to do index there, I don't have that code, right? I got rid of it. I've got nothing to do with to-do items in here anymore. So my problem is developer UI. I just deleted this entity and stuff is still trying to reference it, but that stuff's gone. Let's go here and delete the obj folder and the bin folder while we're at it, and then watch as it magically recreates them and still gives me the bug. There it is. Alright, so what are you doing? What is no. Alright, the typer namespace to do item does not exist in clean architecture entities. Yada yada yada. It referenced this CS Pride, so I thought I'd look in there, but I don't see anything. Tree right. I don't know what tree right means. No, tree. Still don't know what you mean. I need a whole sentence. Only tree. No idea. Still not a sentence. Right, I can get rid of this just to get rid of that warning. That's not really going to help. I think I've run into this before, but I can't remember what I did to fix it. I'm pretty sure it didn't have anything to do with trees, though. So, let's see. How is it even getting this? So this to do shouldn't even be there. In this file that's being generated, if I look for do item, it's right there. Okay, so what is still generating this file when I've already nuked all the source code that would have generated it? I can come out here and delete that. Look at that. I didn't nuke the view. I don't know why I have a view. I thought this thing used all Razor pages. Alright. Do you have any references to class? Yes, I do. That's what I just found. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I thought I was doing pure Razor pages, so I wasn't even looking at views. But that did it. And then the error was showing me Razor as the folder name, so I was thinking, oh, it's a Razor page. Okay, everything built. Let's make sure my tests all run, and then we'll commit, and then we'll continue on this. So let's run all the tests. All the tests ran. Got a whole 4 of them. They're just my default clean architecture. Well, no, these are archive video ones. So that's something. Should probably rename that clean architecture namespace, but we'll do that later. Alright, so let's jump in here, make sure we're in the root, git status, all that stuff. I don't need a branch for this, I don't think. So I'll just add everything. Git commit -m fixing entity references from UI and git push. And it always gives me that HTTP request exception, but then it still works. So, I don't know. We're good. Okay. Now let's go back. Get rid of some of this junk we don't need. And that was create. So let's do delete. Delete should be trivial. And this stuff's all red for some reason. There's no way that's right. Yeah. Visual Studio is just confused. I'm going to restart Visual Studio. See if that fixes it. Fortunately, VS 2019 starts pretty fast. This machine I'm running it on is actually 5 years old, I think. It's not a new machine. And you see it starts up pretty quickly. And all the red's gone. So when in doubt, reboot. It's the standard Microsoft way. Alright. I don't need these. Because they annoy me. Alright, so this is still doing a bind property on archive video. I literally don't need anything from it except for its ID. So what I can do is I can come in here and I can say protected class delete video model public int ID, except I don't think it's an int. Is it an int? Maybe it's an int. Base entity. Yeah, it's an int. Okay, so yeah, it's an int. So that's all I need is that. So then I can say bind property on this. Like that, delete video model. Archive video to delete. Control dot rename. And that should work. I don't know what that's doing. C# rename tracking code fix provider. Oh, okay. Didn't actually work. Alright, now that's okay, except it needs to be a var now. because that's the entity. So archive video entity equals go get the thing based on the ID, and this ID is actually just being passed in. Alright, so I don't even need bind property here, do I? Yeah, that's just... There's no reason for that to be a bound property. And I don't even think I need a DTO, because all it's doing is passing in the ID. So I'm just going to get rid of this. Alright, now let's take the entity right there that we need. And similarly here. Okay, and then these just become these. I don't really like that the property name is the same as the entity type name either. That could cause confusion, especially when you get to rename things, as you're seeing. Alright, so delete should work. Let's just do our manual test of that. You just built successfully. Why are you failing now? Oh, because I didn't do the view. That's why. And when you build, it doesn't actually build the view. So the model needs to show all this stuff, doesn't it? Alright, fine. I do need that. I just still don't need it to do a bound model, but this get, that's going to set it. Alright. There's my property. Delete video model. That delete video model is actually going to be basically one of these DTOs. So we'll just use that type again. There's my DTO. And it still doesn't need to be bound. I'm 99% certain that's not required. Okay, so archive video equals that. If archive video is null, return not found. Otherwise, I need to do the mapping. And this time I'm mapping from the entity to the DTO. So I'm going to say archive video to delete equals new DTO. And then set each thing that I care about, and that's going to be basically these things: title, date, video. Okay, so title equals that, date equals that, and video URL equals dot video. And I only need that because the delete class is displaying something. On the Are You Sure page. Okay, so that's on the get. It's going to display the Are You Sure. On the post, I don't need that at all. It really is just var video entity. We'll do that same name there. Equals that, and we're done. Alright, so I know I don't need that. But this name is going to be important because it needs to match over here. And I don't have the ID on that, so for now I'm just going to add the ID, but I want to fix this later. I don't want them to be able to set the ID on a create. So the fact that this is being used by create is why I want to get rid of it for that in a minute. But for now I just want to get delete to work. Archive video detail, yeah, ancient coder. Because it's being used by create, that's why it doesn't have it. And it shouldn't have it on create. It shouldn't have it on update either, in my opinion. So the only thing that needs it is delete, really. So delete just needs to have its own DTO, which I'll give it in a minute. But let's just verify this part works. You're not logged in anymore. Log in. Alright, so now can I delete something? Delete, are you sure? Show me the things. Does delete, and it's gone. Alright, so delete works, so that's cool. Alright, so now what I really want is for this class to be a delete vModel, or delete DTO, like I mentioned. So we're going to take this, we're going to put it over here, and I'm not sure where I want it. I guess right here maybe? And it's going to be an archive video delete DTO, which we're going to use here. And I don't need show notes, because it's not using that. Title, to create video, those I all need. Not sure I need the data annotations, I might come back and get rid of those. But now that I have my own type that's just for this page, I'm free to use whatever I want here. And archive video to delete. I need the ID here. Interestingly, it worked without me setting the ID ever. So how did that work? Maybe I don't need the ID actual. I just tested this and it worked, but whatever. Add that. Alright, and then that's the only place I use the DTO. So date created is used. Right, okay, so everything's used now, and everything is in this one place. It's a little bit lengthy. I could probably refactor it to be a little bit shorter, move some of this work out of here. But it's not terrible. Alright, so on that same note, let's go back to create and look at its thing here, and we'll just copy this and we'll give create its own DTO as well. So here's create, here's the property. I guess I'm going to put it right under there. I think that's what I did on the other one. Archive video create DTO. And so on create we don't need the ID, so that goes away. And just need to control dot in some namespaces. Alright, and that's going to remind me too that some of these attributes like required, I don't need required over here because I'm only displaying it, so that can go away. Display name, I'm not sure I'm using those or not. So let's test again. Let's verify whether or not these displays are being used on the delete side of things. Run it. Katachi114, thanks for the follow. Alright, videos, let's do a create. A, B, C, D, create. C is not a valid date. That's true. I guess I am doing some model validation. Now create. Alright, there's that. Now let's say if I want to delete it, it is going to use those things. So I do want to keep those data annotations. And we will delete. Now the interesting thing to look at with that when I say delete is this delete here. So this has it in the query string and that's expected. But this delete, let's view this, let's inspect this. Let's inspect that. Alright. There's a hidden value of that archive video to delete the ID is 2. I want to know why that worked when I didn't have an ID property on there. So that's just bothering me. So if I get rid of this ID right there, and we rebuild, yeah, then I have to get rid of it. Oh, well that's what's going to happen. It's going to blow up there. Because I'm using the wrong model? No. Okay, that's why. I have to leave it. Alright, so that's all working. We tested everything. Everything is happy. Why not use 1DTO for everything? Okay, well here's why. I don't necessarily need all the same fields for each different DTO, right? And so I might use inheritance sometimes. If I were doing MVC and I had one folder full of all my DTOs and I wasn't putting it with the Razor page or the controller that was using it, then yeah, I'd probably be more inclined to reuse them. And a pretty common approach I would do in that case, let's just jump down here, and I'd say public class some DTO, right? And it would have, let's say something simple like public string name, and let's say public int ID. Okay, and so then I would do some work and I would do some CRUD and I would figure out, hey, I need to do a create, and later on I need to do an update. Well, when I do a create, I don't want to have an ID. So maybe I would say this is some DTO, some entity create DTO, and it wouldn't have this. And then I would go and I would say public class some entity DTO inherits from some entity create DTO, but also adds on the ID, right? And so then all my other CRUD operations and everything else would use this DTO except for create, which would use this one, and it would have everything but the ID. So I do use this pattern frequently, especially for like API, web API projects, MVC projects, where you're reusing them across a lot of different things. If you're doing Razor pages though, and you are basically baking the DTO it needs right with the Razor page, the really nice thing about this style is that I can be very specific about what I need, and I can get rid of anything I don't. And that makes it so I don't have to worry about breaking anything, right? Nothing in my application is using this. In fact, this could be, I'm pretty sure, protected. And so I know nothing else outside of this class is using this. So that's going to argue it's less accessible. Can that be protected? Maybe. We'll see. I can't remember if the code behind structure and Razor pages lets you get away with this. Yeah, it won't. Alright, so never mind. So it has to be public. But I'm still, assuming I'm following a convention where no other Razor page is reaching into this page and grabbing its DTO, I can confidently change this to suit anything I need for this page. And that gives me a much more flexible design, essentially. There's a little bit of potential duplication here because, let's say later on I change this type for date created and I've got it in, 3 different Razor pages where I've got to change it. There's that. So there's a balance, right? But this is an approach and it works fine. Not saying it's the only approach, not saying you have to do it this way. But it does give you some benefits. It's not a slam dunk that one way or the other is better. All right. And the nice thing about it is that now the DTO is literally just right here in this page. That's the only page I need. And you could say, you know what, that page is too long now, and I would agree with you. But I'm going to fix that by making these smaller, not by getting rid of this. So when I'm done, these handlers are going to be tiny, and this DTO is going to be like the only thing in here, which is as it should be because this thing is the model. That's what it's called. On create, what if you just leave out the ID? That's what I just showed you, I thought. What do you mean? I just showed you how I would leave out the ID. So yes, do that. I agree. Or are you just saying don't map it? Like just keep it in the DTO but don't do anything with it? That would also be an option, I suppose. Let's do another commit because everything's working. Alright, so there's that. Let's just cruise on through to details. And so like details is where now you're going to start to see some duplication where, using one DTO is starting to be attractive again. And we may refactor that, right? I have no problem with moving back and forth between things. As long as you're able to refactor quickly, it's not a big deal. Alright, so let's do that. And let's think about this for a moment. So on the details page, I've got an archive video. I don't have bound property on this, notice, because this doesn't have anything but a get. There is no post or delete or anything else happening on this. And I suppose for Razor pages, there's never delete. It's always just post. What cause issues if you just don't map the ID, and what could be the issues? I don't have a choice over what's mapped. If you mean like for bound property, like let's go here. This bind property, that's an MVC feature doing model binding. It's going to map everything. So yeah, it'll map the ID to whatever was passed in. Now, when I do my manual mapping here, I could skip out of the ID if I'm actually doing this style. I have to know to do that. I have to remember to not map the ID. And some other developer that comes on the team might not know that, right? They might just look at this and be like, oh, somebody forgot to map the ID and add it. What would be the issue? Well, it might not be anything, right? It depends. Depends on whether you're using SQL Server or whether you're using some other backend. Depends on if you're using GUIDs or something else. Maybe if it doesn't get mapped and you're using GUIDs, it ends up being 0, and that works the first time, but then every time after that it breaks because it's going to have a conflict with that existing key. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it overwrites the existing key. If you're not using GUIDs and you're using SQL, if I pass in here and I say, ID equals, whatever the model was ID, let's say it's 123, is that ever going to hurt anything? Probably not, because when any framework tries to do an add on an existing ID, if let's say that existed here, it should blow up. What if it didn't exist? What's it going to do then? Well, maybe it'll create it. I don't know. So the issue is that there's a whole lot of unknown there, right? Will it cause issues? Maybe. It depends. Depends on your backend, depends on your database, depends on your type of your ID. You know what? If I don't have it there, there's no way there's any issues. It's totally safe. There's no problem. There's no confusion. No other developer is going to come along and think that I forgot it. It's just not there. And it's not there because it doesn't need to be there. My code's shorter. My code's got fewer possibilities of things that could go wrong. So that's why I try and keep this to only having the things it should have and nothing else. The possibility that there's a problem is probably small, but it's not as small as if I just don't have it. Does that make sense? It's not wrong if you have the ID. It's just not quite as clean in my opinion. And my code's not quite as clean because I've got this duplication, right? And so, like I say, it's a trade-off. It's a matter of which one's more important to you. All right, so let's go look at, let's just take this DTO for now. And like I said, we might end up with some duplication here that I'm going to want to clean up later. Let's go here, and we'll just say this is our public class archive video. We'll say this is a display DTO, or even better would be details, because that's what it's being used for, right? And then we're going to say that that is that, and this is archive video. We'll say details, and we'll pull these in. And I don't know if we need them all, but I think we do. We'll pull those. And on get, we're going to get an archive video. This is going to be a var archive video entity, and if that entity is null, then we're going to return not found. Otherwise, we're going to set this guy to be a new instance of itself with the various things it needs, which are that, and that, oh, that was nice. Just populated it for me. And I totally screwed it up. It's going so fast there for a second. Alright, so there's my manual mapping. Ancient coder, yes, thanks for explaining it. You bet. Does that make sense, or am I wasting time on something that's stupid and pedantic? What do you think? Which way would you go? Would you just keep the ID so you don't have to have the duplication? Or would you get rid of it so it's like safer? Alright. I need to take this and put it over here. A bunch of times. And I don't have questions. So now that's where we're going to need those questions. Alright. Yeah, because I put those. I think I added that. I don't think those are always there. List questions. Okay, video questions. Right, okay. And I do here include the questions. So this thing needs to have also a question DTO. So we'll say public class question DTO. And it needs to list those questions. And the questions are in display template list questions. This is going to tell me what it wants. It wants question text and timestamp. So those are the two things that I need. And right now this is tightly coupled to entities.question, so I'm going to need that to be my DTO for that to work. So for something that's going to be shared across a shared view like this, a display template, I probably do want a shared DTO. Alright, let's see. Ancient coder, always use one DTO and didn't map the ID. Okay, cool. Yeah, and I do that too, so that, I mean, it works. Alright, I want to change this to use a shared DTO. And the reason why I want a shared DTO for this is because I don't have any CRUD operations on question anyway right now. It's only going to be used to display these. I think. Or maybe I did I get that? No. Okay. Yeah, and so since this is shared outside of that Razor page, it should be its own thing. So where to put it? I just got rid of all those folders. Suppose it's a view model, so I guess we'll create a view models folder, even though I don't like that. New folder, view models, new class. And what did we say it needs? It needs question text, timestamp seconds, which I can pull faster from here. Alright, so that's basically a DTO. The vModel is a kind of DTO. So we're going to take that, put it over here, and say it needs to be that. And it needs to be this namespace. Now I could put this namespace into my view imports, I think it is, here, which I should probably do. Let's do that. Yeah, and then I shouldn't need it here. I've screwed that up somehow. Ultramark, thanks for the follow. Trash Lord, I missed you a few minutes ago. Thanks for the follow. Alright. And that's still those errors. Okay, so archive video detail.questions. Let's go fix up that finally. So now I've got that question view model. This DTO is going to use that. So I'm going to say public list, not list bindable, whatever. List of question view model questions. And we'll just new it up right here. So it's never null. Because that's really annoying when your collection is null. This doesn't need to be there because I moved it to the view model. Okay, so now this questions is going to need to get mapped. So after I map all those things, we're going to add the questions. Which I can probably do with some link. Let's see. ubd.questions equals, how about this, .add archive video entity .questions .select. Hang on, that's not in the right spot. Let's do this. Questions .select question view model. I want to create a new question view model for each entity, right? So this is doing my mapping for me, and I want to say question text equals q.question text, and that equals q.that. And if I had automapper, I could do that right there too. And, right. Can I convert from question view model to question view model? Really? Can I convert from IEnumerable to question numeral? Okay. This is expecting 1. There we go. So add a range. There's that, there's that. Okay. Does that make sense? So we're going to take our DTO and its list of questions, which starts out empty. And we're going to add to it all the questions that are on our entity that we just pulled out of the database. It included that list of questions. So we're going to take that list of questions and we're going to use select in a link statement to transform it. Yeah, I'm agreeing with Entity Atom. AutoMapper's great, but don't use it unless you really need it. And that's why it's not here yet, because I haven't reached the point where I feel like I really need it. But it is a really nice tool. Okay, so this should let me do list of questions. Archive video details. ID. Oh, I need the ID too. I guess I needed it there. All right. Alright, let's test it again. We want to see if the details page still works. So we can go into videos, and we can see a video, we can go to details, and there's details. And it's got, this is all markdown format. I did that the other day. And then these are the questions. How do I do something? How do I do something else? So that seems to work. So eventually I'll have some automated tests for those types of things, but for now we're just manually testing. Alright, so we'll shut that down, do another commit. Alright, so now that should be out there. And we're on to what? The edit page. So the edit page is going to be same deal. Again, we're left to decide, does it make sense for us to use a DTO that's copied into this or a shared DTO? And I'm just going to keep down this path of using one DTO per page just to see what that ends up looking like and how much duplication there is. And then we can kind of evaluate it after and say, you know what, that's too much duplication, let's move it somewhere and share it. But for now, we're going to take this and go here and put it there. And we'll say this is the edit DTO. Pull in our namespaces. I think that's a feature ReSharper had, was like paste would automatically pull in the using statements for things. Visual Studio's caught up with a ton of ReSharper features, but it doesn't have that one yet. I guess I don't like that name because it's the same name as the type. So we'll just call it model. Alright, so now if we look at our get, it's going to take the entity, our archive video entity. It's going to check and see if that's null. Otherwise, we need to map it to the model. And so we're going to say archive video model equals new, one of those, and then do all the left-hand, right-hand code. And I think I've got this already on details. So I'm going to steal that code there. Okay, and now we need that archive view model. Context.attach. We have to create a new instance, or we just have to fetch it and change it. So I would usually fetch it and change it. So what this is doing, I don't like this approach. This is another reason to avoid using entities as your wire protocol. Okay, Entity Atom. I was creating side-by-side razor pages in Blazor. basically took the page model, was able to reuse it completely for server-side Blazor. Nice. Yeah, Blazor's going to be awesome once they get that done. All right, so what this does, before I started mucking with it, is it actually took an entity here, bound it magically to whatever was in the post, to whatever properties it had. I already showed you how that works. And then down here, it literally just like attaches it to the database and tells Entity Framework, by the way, this thing's modified, so make sure you go create an update statement for it. And that's it. It doesn't actually fetch the thing from the database, so it doesn't know anything about the current state of it. It doesn't care. It just says, hey, let me just grab the thing that just came over the wire, and I'm going to create an update statement with it, with everything it's got, right? So I don't like that. That's dangerous to me. So again, that's why I'm going to use a DTO. So when this comes in, we're going to take the DTO and create a model. It's going to look a lot like this, but in reverse, right? Because I'm going to say var current video entity equals context.find based on the key, right? So that'll be, I'm going to need a key for this. And that is archive video model .id, I think. Is that the right syntax for that? I could do a first or default, but I think this is what I want. Finds an entity. Archive video model. You're a property. Why do you think it's a type? Can I convert from int to system.type? Rykane, thanks for the follow. Alright, why is that doing the wrong thing? Find takes an object params array. Screw it, I'm going to do a first or default. Oh, I know why. I didn't tell it what type it was. Context dot archive videos dot find. That'll do it. There we go. Now it knows what the thing is. That's why I wanted a type, because I didn't tell it which DB set it was using. Okay, so there's the current thing from the database. We're going to pull that out, and we're going to update it. Alright, so we'll say current video entity. And AutoMapper, again, would do this real nicely. So certain things here, like, now I can make a decision. Yeah, and I probably should have waited. Good call, Entity Adam. Is there a find async? There is. Alright, cool. Alright, now I can make the decision here. Do I want to be able to map everything? Right? So, date created. That doesn't sound like something I want them to be able to update. So maybe I don't map that. Right? So when I'm at this step, I can be deciding which things are worthy of being updated. ID, you shouldn't update the ID. Questions, you can't just update the questions collection from here, I don't think. In fact, there's no way to do it because I didn't put it in my DTO. So basically, you get show notes equals whatever that thing is, avm.shownotes, and cve dot title equals avm dot title, right? And I think that's it. Oh, video URL. I suppose you could update that. Alright, and that should match pretty much. I don't know if this date created is being used, so I might even just get rid of that. If it's obviously not being used on the update. I don't have to attach it anymore. That's done for me, because when I pulled this out, it's being tracked. Find async is singular default under the covers. Okay, good to know. Find async does the identity map, though, which singular default doesn't. So if I had already loaded it previously, it would not go out to the database. It would just grab it out of its identity map. That's my understanding. Is that right, Adam? Do you know? So if I'm going to do this multiple times in the course of a request, find async's a little bit better because the second time it's already going to have it. Yeah. Yeah, good. That's what I thought. Okay, so I don't need the attach because I've already got it and it's already tracking. I modified it. I'm going to do save changes, and then it's just some more renaming of things. Alright, that all looks good. So let's check the view, the page, the razor, and the model is that. I changed that to that. So I'm using title, show notes. I am using displaying date created, so that's fine. I'll still keep that. Entity framework, I better know some of this stuff. Yeah, I would think so. It wasn't so much quizzing you, I was just making sure that my understanding was correct. Alright. That looks right. And that looks good. So let's see if the edit page works in production, or in the web page anyway. So here's this. I need to log in again apparently. We're logged in. We can edit video 2 and make it something else. Date created, let's make it 16, March 16th. And new URL. Save it. Boom. Object reference. Current entity show notes. Archive video model show notes. Interesting. So it's better to use find than first or default. Yes, if you don't want to make the database hit. That's the only reason. If you don't always want that, to be fair, right? But if you're going to use it multiple times in the course of a request, like one web request, let's say you want to look up the user and you do it in an authorize filter, and then you want to do it again inside your controller, and you want to do it again inside a service. If you're doing that all with first or default each time, it's literally going to make a select star from users where ID equals whatever each time. But if you do find, it's going to first look and see, does Entity Framework already know about this entity? Is already tracking it in memory? And if it is, which it will be after the first one, then it'll just give you that entity right back. Right? It won't actually go fetch it. It won't actually have to map it and model bind. Well, it's not called model binding, but it won't have to deserialize it into an entity or do all that work. So it's like a little bit of caching for you, but it only works on IDs, nothing else. Yeah, and entity atom has another good point. You can't use include with it. All right, so what happened here? A null reference occurred on current video entity.show notes. How did I do that? That's right there, which means that this didn't find an ID, which means that this didn't get bound correctly, right? That's because I didn't set the ID here. I guess that's going to be why. So let's do ID equals .id. Let's try again. Videos, edit. Alright, it was the 15th, we're going to make it the 16th. Everything else is ASDF. Okay, okay, look at this. Did not make it the 16th. I didn't give it an error, but I didn't let him update it, because that's date created. I don't want him to change that. Alright, so then the last thing I would change with this, to make it production quality, is I don't want him to actually be able to modify this. So this input, I think, should just be another, should just be a display, right? Should be like at archive something like that. Why is that not a good thing? Hey, how's it going, Phil? Archive video model works fine everywhere else. Why does it not work here? I have to say model dot, don't I? That's not very consistent. ASP.NET team. Alright, we'll get rid of those. And let's try editing this again. I shut it down. There's that. There's videos. There's the edit page. There's the date created is still visible, but I can't modify it, which is good. Everything else works. Let's look at the details. Everything's good. Alright, that seems to be how I want it. So let's commit that. Cleaned up edit page. Okay, so let's close some things here. Index page, I think is the last one. Just has a list of them. It's an iList of archived video. It should really have a list of just the DTO that it needs. I don't know why it has these. I don't think it needs those anymore. So let's just follow our pattern. I think details is going to be the closest one. And we'll create a simple DTO for the index page to use. Command line get. Yeah, there's only like a few commands you need to know, right? So if you look, I'm basically doing get add dot, add all the things I just worked on. Get commit dash m, here's my commit message. Get push. That's it. Repeat. You can see, you know, that's all I'm doing. I started off with status to make sure everything was good to go. And then it's those three things again and again and again. So it's really not too bad. And it's a little bit easier for me at least than going into here and going into here and then doing whatever here and setting the changes and pushing. There's like 10 clicks I got to do in here, which I don't like. It's just faster for me to just do the command line. Alright, where was I? I'm going to add a quick DTO here. This is going to be archive video list. Don't like that. Index. Okay, the index needs to know, I think it needs to know the ID. It doesn't care if things are required, so that can go away. Might need the display names. So we'll keep those. We'll come back and get rid of any of these we don't need. I'm pretty sure we don't need questions. Okay, so now this archive iList of archived video becomes a list of these guys. Archive video list. And then this archive video list equals my data context dot my videos dot, and now I got to do a select. So here, let's do that, and then we're going to do dot select. Need to pull in link, maybe. I don't want to use selection, but don't select. Yeah, just give me my using statement. Thank you. Alright. There's a great PowerShell plugin for Git, which will allow you what branch you're on if you're on a... Yeah, I often use that. I didn't do it in this case because I just did PowerShell from here. So, not there. From here. If you're in like a folder and you want to have PowerShell, you can just do this, and it'll open you up PowerShell in that folder, which is nice. That way you don't have to navigate to wherever. Which you can also do from up here, one of these, somewhere up here. There, it's under File. You can also do that there. Is there a PoshGit? There's got to be a PoshGit extension here somewhere, right? Use VS Code. Sure. Yeah, VS Code's not as bad. Visual Studios is a little bit harder to navigate to, I think. VS Code's Git controls are a little nicer. A little cleaner, a little simpler, I think. Alright. So let's finish this selection. All I want to do is map from the archive video entity to the video index DTO entity, and then give it the right properties it wants. So in my select, I'm going to take each video and we create a new archive video index DTO with this these settings, right? The ID equals v.id, and the, why are you starting down there? Date created equals v.date created, And show notes equals v.show notes. And title, and that. Alright, so now that's converted, and the result of this will be an queryable of archive video index DTO, which is nice. And then I can to-list it, and that's fine. Do I even need to? It's an iList. I'm not sure I need to to-list it. Maybe I do. Probably I do. There you go, your list. Okay, so now with that, let's see how we do. We gotta clean up the view and then we're done. So on the view side of things, I renamed this. So we come over here and that stays the same, but that changes. Title, date created video. Title, date created video. Alright. So all I need is title, date created, and video. I don't need that's details. Here's this one. Title, I don't need show notes. And that's it. Do I need the ID? I'd be surprised if I didn't need the ID. There it is. There's the ID. Alright, so that's good. Doesn't contain a definition for, yeah, that's because I deleted it. Alright. Let's run this one. And then we'll do a quick code review and see if we like where we're at. Alright, so we're still an admin. Here's my list. So it's still got all the data it's supposed to have. And still, all the associated links still work. The other thing that the other Git clients don't have is up arrow to redo the same command. So you saw how quick that was. That you can just be like, bam, 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 add the things, you know, and do the commit and do the push. Like you don't even have to type out the commands. So that's a nice feature. All right, so now let's look at our code for a sec. We have in here we're doing some CRUD operations. We've got this guy here that I moved in, and I don't think anything's using it. So let's get rid of that, and then just verify that I didn't break anything. Okay, so now our create DTO looks like this, and it's got title, show notes, date created, video URL, and is that identical to anything else? I don't think it is. It does not have ID. Delete has ID, title, date created, video. Details has all the same stuff, but also has a list of questions, so it's not the same. Edit has, I think, all the same things, but it adds ID. Is that the same as delete? So I think edit DTO and delete DTO might be the same. Let's look at those side by side. Now this one has some additional metadata, like saying that title's required, and it has show notes, and the delete one does not have show notes. So yeah, so I have what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different DTO models here, but each one is exactly what is required for that Razor page, and none of them are exactly the same. So you could argue that there's a lot of duplicated code here, but the actual types themselves are fit for purpose with their Razor page. And since they're only used by that Razor page, we're free to modify them however we want, and we don't have to worry about breaking anything else. So I'll take that kind of duplication all day long because of the flexibility it gives me. And then if later on I need to change my underlying model, like let's say I need to rename show notes to something else, that means I might have to touch like 5 of these other classes. That's sort of like a shotgun surgery code smell. That part might stink. And right now there's a little bit of duplication here because this value is a magic string that I've spread out across several different places. I would refactor that perhaps into a constant. But that's about it, I think, for now. Alright, so let me do a quick commit to get rid of that file. Add that. That should be remove unused vmodel. Push. Boom. Okay. And then I think we're done with that issue. So coming back out here, go to my issue list, avoid using entities in web. This is done. And we'll just close it. I didn't do a pull request, so I don't have a pull request to associate it with. Alright. Let's say that we did want to specify that name. So the other thing we can clean up is up here. I don't need any of this metadata anymore. This stuff doesn't belong here. It's all UI specific stuff. The nice thing about it was that I only had to have it in one place when it was here. But we're going to take care of that in a second. That gets rid of some of these data annotation model stuff. And makes it so our core domain entities are much cleaner. Now let's come down here and let's figure out how we can clean that up. I'm going to add, do I want a global one? I think we'll do a global one. So those are all display name, right? So let's create a class here. We'll call it display constants.cs. And display constants.cs is going to have a public class archive video, I think, and it's going to have in it a public const video URL string. I think that was one of them. Equals video URL. Alright, so theoretically I can take that constant and I can go anywhere I'm doing a display video URL and I can specify display constants dot archive video dot video URL. Right? And then I can repeat that anywhere I was using it. So here and here and basically everywhere. And this will get rid of that magic string. Now the nice thing about this constants approach that I'm doing, let's see, we need date created here, is that I'm getting that tree level IntelliSense because I'm using this nested class. So this inner class, this archive video inner class inside of this one, and we can make this a static so nobody tries to instantiate it. Statistic. Because that is an inner class like that, you get that tree level IntelliSense. So it's a nice way to do stuff. Alright, so we'll take this and copy that display name here, only it's going to be date created, and then we'll just copy it to all the things. And when we're done, we'll have a lot fewer magic strings in our Razor pages. Alright. I'm going to run this just to make sure I didn't do something stupid, and like Razor pages is going to be like, oh, your attribute can't support constants or something like that. But no, it looks like it's working. Cool. Alright. And so we'll do it one more time. I think there was one more for show notes. So show notes is going to look an awful lot like this one, like that. Show notes. No, I don't want to rename it. I want to, where'd my constants go? There it is. Show notes. Keep it in alphabetical order. because why not? And let's show notes. I think edit also had that one. I think that was about it. No. Just looking for red text. There's none. So all my red text, which is magic strings, is now inside of my constants file. So I like that better. And no annotations are in my model. Alright, so let's do another git add all the things, git commit, cleaned up annotations and magic strings, push. Alright, and another thing I like to do is push frequently. Like do little nuggets of work, make sure everything works, and then push your changes up. Or create a pull request, or whatever it is. I wouldn't necessarily do a pull request for every one of these things, because that's a little bit too granular, and you'd overwhelm your team with pull request reviews. But for the feature of, refactoring all these Razor pages to use DTOs, that could be big enough to be one pull request. You could have a bunch of commits in the course of getting that work done, and then, on your own branch, and then do a pull request when you're ready, when you've completed that whole scope of work. So like I do commits probably like multiple times per hour, and I'll do a pull request a couple times a day, right? If I were doing work the whole time, maybe as many as 3 or 4 times a day at the outset, I would guess, but probably typically like 1 or 2 times a day. If you're doing a pull request every 40 hours of work, like once a week you do a pull request, they're probably going to be a little bigger than people would like. There was one more show notes magic string. How did I miss it? Oh, I did miss it. Thanks. I was looking for that red text. See, in a pull request review would have caught that, but evil me, I'm just committing right to master, because right now nobody but me is working on this. That's not what I want. There we go. Thank you, OpenWindow365. So would you commit, for example, the fix, create page, and so on and so forth? You mean all these message names? Those will show up as the commits. I probably should have been doing a pull request style here just to show how I would actually do it. Let's go look at the code for a second. So if we come out here and we look at history, commits. Alright, so here's my list of commits basically from today, right? Fixing these entity reference, delete tails, edit index, remove the thing, clean up some other stuff. All of this could be one pull request, right? I could do all this stuff on a branch, and that branch might be something like, hey, LC Pablo, thanks for the follow. All of these things would be on my branch as commits, and then when I do the pull request, I can squash them. So the actual thing that gets merged into master wouldn't be this verbose. It wouldn't have all these little things in it. It would only have the one thing that was the feature level item in it. Would be how I would probably do it on a real project. Or any project that's got more than just me working on it. So eventually this thing might be something that more people work on, and I'd start to clean up my style to be a little bit more robust, let's say. All right, anybody else have any questions? I've been putting this one off for so long. I wonder if we should start thinking about this. How am I going to store the actual video content? And somebody earlier on had a recommendation that the Azure Blob storage has some metadata location. I think that ship's already sailed, right? Because I'm already storing all this data here in my database. So I think I'm going to keep that approach. But I could definitely store the videos in blob storage. Another thing that I've been looking at recently that might play in here is this Valet Key pattern. So if you haven't heard of this, this Valet Key pattern is interesting because of the specific example that I'm doing, which is I'm going to have a large file, this video, and I want to lock down access to it to only those people that have a subscription to this service. And so if you have a subscription, you can get the file, and if you don't, you shouldn't be able to. Okay, so if I take this big file and I put it out in Amazon CloudFront, right, and then my security is a page that knows the URL to the CloudFront file, then that's really easy for someone to just look at that URL and email it to somebody or paste it on Twitter or whatever, right? The actual file isn't secure, just the list of files is secure. So without following this pattern, what you might do is have a Razor page or an API endpoint that checks to see if the user is a valid user and then does an HTTP request and goes and fetches the file as a byte stream and then streams the bytes, from that API endpoint to the user. And that works. The problem with that approach is that now you're paying ingress and egress network cost on all that data. Now, if your Azure web app and your blob storage account are both in the same data center, you're probably okay on that front, because I don't think Azure is going to charge you for inside the data center data transfer, or if they do, it's less. But it's still putting a lot more load on your web app than you would otherwise need to. All right, so what this does is it says, okay, here's the user. They can go out and talk to your API endpoint and get a token. And they don't necessarily ever see this, right? This can just be baked into the user interface. But then when they go to ask for that resource from its actual source, like Azure Blob Storage, they can pass that token to it, and then Azure Blob Storage will decide whether or not to stream the file to them. And so your application only has to deal with these tokens. It doesn't have to actually stream all the bits through it. There's some code in here that we could use here. So here's an example of a controller. And it is using this shared access policy to do this. So you can generate a shared access signature, it's called. And I haven't done this in production much yet that I can recall. But this code theoretically will let me do exactly what I want, right? So I want to take and store the code inside the blob. And then when someone says, hey, I want to view that video, it should do this work, right? Where it's going to say, go get that video out of the blob client and pass in this data here. This is my policy to get it. All right. So I'm actually going to take a reference to that and make sure I put this here. Perhaps use the Valet Key Pattern to access files stored in blob storage. Like that. Alright. Let's see how much time have I got left. About 15 minutes. 15 minutes is good enough time to write a test or two. I haven't written any tests today, and we should probably do that. Or I was promising to clean these up and make them smaller, so maybe I should do that. One thing we could do to make them smaller is use Automapper, but another thing would be to just pull this data out of here if I can. Let's see. Got an EF repository that works with anything, don't I? Yeah, okay. Blob storage or blog storage? Did I say blog storage? I've done that sometimes. Or did I type blog storage? That's what I usually do. I usually type blog. Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah. My typing is so fast that I always want to type blog. Thank you. Let's make current files smaller. Alright, sounds good. So let's go to the index page. This should be the easiest one. It's got these things that nothing seems to be using. So I'm pretty sure I can delete those, and that'll be smaller. I'm not sure why those were there. I'll probably find out after I delete them that they were critical to something. But let's get rid of that. And then let's change this to be an EF. No, I don't want to do that. Interface, an iRepository. That's what I want. So this thing just needs an iRepository. From there, like that. And then we need to control dot and assign it to a field. And I need to tell it that my preference is for those to be underscore prefixed. but I'll do that later. I don't really need this. It's going to yell at me to get rid of this anyway. Okay, so I've got a DB context and a repository. We're going to have them side by side for a moment. I'm going to come down here, and instead of that context at archive videos, we'll get rid of that, and we'll say this is underscore repository dot list of archive video, like that. What does that return? That returns a list of archive video. So, bam. Now everything's red. Big House 50, thanks for the follow. Alright, what did I screw up here? Getting a list of archive video from a repository, dot select, all that, dot toList async. Enumerable does not contain. Oh, is it just dot toList at this point? I don't. Yeah, my repository is not async, so I need to get rid of that. And that's all it does. So I might need to change the repository to be async at some point. But there's that. And if that works, then I don't need this, and I don't need this. And that in turn cleans up a few of those. So let's see what that looks like. And verify it still works. Right, Ancient Coder saw it, that it's not an async task. Probably faster than I saw it. Alright, but there's my list and it still works. Alright, so that's one down. And what we're doing is we're getting rid of knowledge of my infrastructure layer from here. So infrastructure.data I want to get rid of. And I missed this one right there. And so I can check my using statements to see if I missed anything. And then once it's gone, I should just see core and Microsoft stuff. Still have context in there. I know, I just cleaned it up. Alright, so let's go to create over here, and let's do the same thing here. Line 19. Did I miss one still? The using statement should fix it. I did get that one. Alright, your chat's coming through slow, I guess. Probably not your fault. Alright. Let's go here and do the same deal. So we're going to come in here, go iRepository. There, repository, control dot, not what I wanted, too fast. So I don't want it to be a property, I don't like that as well. Control dot that, there we go. Underscore that, get rid of my mistake, fix that to that. Alright, so now we've got our thing. And then wherever the context was being used, which we can find quickly if we delete it, like this. This is called lean on the compiler. You can see now with the red underscores where that's being done, and we're just adding something to it. So that's easy enough. We say repository.add of archive video, which I'm not even sure I'm going to need because it'll be able to infer that from there. So there's that. And my repository does the save changes in it, so I don't need any of that. Right? So let's look at that repository for a second, just verify that. So here's this, here's add, and in this case it's doing the save changes as it goes. Right? Delay in the stream. That's why I figured Ancient Coder. I know you know what you're doing. Alright, so now that we've cleaned it up off of add, we can go check our using statement, and there's no infrastructure references there. And we can test it. And this isn't really cleaning it up in terms of making it that much smaller. The next thing will be to pull stuff out of there. Create still works. Yay. Alright, so we'll just continue down this list of just making the repository work. So here, we're going to do the same pattern. We'll get rid of this right off the bat. We'll just replace this since we know what we're doing now. iRepository, pull in namespace, repository. Come on, Visual Studio, you're supposed to learn. I want it to be named like this, and I don't want this. I will fix that preference at some point. And then clean up this. So this is our first or default, which is going to become var archive video equals repository.get by ID. And you need to know what it is. There. So that does the same thing, pretty much. Now my repository is probably not using find. Let's go double check that. Yeah, it's just doing singular default. So I'm not necessarily going to get the benefit of that identity map that we talked about earlier, but it will still do the job. It just may end up hitting the database more often than you would like. In my case, the way I solve that is I generally will have a cached repository using a decorator pattern, and so it would be in the cache. So I'm adding that anyway. The benefit of my cache is it also works with lists, and it also works with other things. So, or at least these two. So it becomes a little bit more full-featured than just the EF identity map anyway. Alright, so what else do we need? We need to do that, which is basically the same thing as this. And then we want to remove it. The thing. Alright. And at some point I'm getting all these warnings now that say that the method lacks await operators. I probably will want to convert this EF repository to be async, or to have an async version, so that it works better with async. I think I have that code somewhere done already, actually. In fact, it might even be a change in clean. Let me check something real quick. I think we updated that on clean architecture. Or at least it was on the list. Clean architecture, source, infrastructure, data, EF. Nope, they're not async yet. Okay, that's coming. Alright, so let me get back into here and we'll finish this up and wrap up the stream and raid somebody else with y'all. So, what did we get through? We need to do details. Details, we don't need this context. We're going to put in iRepository, repository. We need that. We need that. That. There's one line where it's using it, and it's this. But notice this one's different. In fact, I may need to undo what I just did. So in my repository, I don't have a way to do include. And so this becomes a challenge, because in the details page, I need to include the list of questions. So let's go, I just got rid of it, but let's go look at our EF repository. And it does not have that functionality in there. So in the short term, I'm going to do this with a bunch of undoing. Alright, we're going to add a to-do here. Refactor to use repository plus specification pattern with include. Alright, so let's talk about that for a sec, and I'm just going to commit where we are, I think, now. Well, I can do edit. I'll talk about the specification pattern first. So let's go here. If you haven't seen it, if you go to the eShop on Web sample that I've written, this is a Microsoft reference application, and it comes with this 100 and some page ebook here that you can read if you like. But also, it uses the specification pattern. And so these are specifications that are defined in the domain, and the specifications are basically they encapsulate a query, right? So let's see this page. When you run the sample, it's basically an online store. I don't have a screenshot of it handy, but it's got things like a shopping cart and various product listings and things like that. So if you notice, this one here has customer orders with items, right? That's telling me that it has a include in it. So let's look at what that looks like. So in here, you can see it says add include the order items on the order. So it's of type order. We want to add the order items, which is a property of order. And then further from that, we also want to specify the item ordered off of that. So it's not just one, but two levels deep of add include. So you can say add include, and then you can say then include in EF, or in the specification you can do this to get a nested include statement. So what does that look like when you run it? Well, in here I've got an EF repository, and this is the one that I made async, not the one in clean architecture. So here these ones are all asyncified. But if you notice that when I want to do here list async with the specification, right? It calls this apply specification to the data. So if we look at this apply specification, it says take this specification evaluator, take the DB context set as queryable and pass it into it, and then pass in the specification that you're doing. So what does that evaluator look like? Well, it basically just takes an iQueryable and applies these different lambdas to it. So here's the specification evaluator. It takes in an iQueryable of your stuff. In my case, this would be my archive videos. And then my specification. In this case, my specification would be something like include the questions. And so it does the criteria. So if you have criteria specified, then it'll say where the criteria. And then for includes, there's two types. There's expression-based includes and string-based includes. So it just runs both of those. And it literally just says, specification.includes these things. And for each one, current.include that thing. And this one's pretty full-featured. It also supports ordering, it also supports grouping, and it also supports paging, right? So you don't have to use any of those things. Your specification could be pretty simple, like the one I showed, but it could be more. So like basket with items is pretty simple. Like here's your shopping basket. Hey, include the items. Here's the home page, which has paging. So it says, okay, here's all my paging stuff. Skip this, take that. Skip however many records, take however many records. That's your page size and what page you're on. And then these are two queries that you put in from the home page to filter it. So you can say, I only want to see this brand, or I only want to see this kind of product. And so this is my filter. That's my where clause. That's my my query for .where, and then we just apply the paging. Right. So I don't have to do .include on this one because it's not using it. So I just ignore the .include. So all this code is out there on this eShop on Web sample, and some of it is eventually porting over to that clean architecture starter. I don't want that to get too big and complicated though, so that's why it's not all there. All right. All right. So with that, I'm going to call. Can we do edit? I think we can do edit. I want to wrap it up here in a moment. But yeah, let's finish edit with that repository, and then we'll be done. So we'll just do this real quick. So do this, and then here we do the iRepository, pull in the namespace, repository, create that, do that, rename it that, context, that's all I wanted. Alright, build it, find all the where it needs to be fixed. It's a first or default, that's the same thing I did somewhere else. It's not going to be in await anymore, so var archive video entity equals repository.get by ID, id.value. Right? And that's safe because I already checked it for null right there. Get by ID of T. Archive video. Now you're happy. Alright, I think I do that at least 2 places. So let's grab that, do it again here. Except it's going to be archive viewmodel.id. So here, there's that. And then I needed to name it the right thing. Alright, and then my repository just has a save or an update method. Repository.update, yeah, of the type. And it's not awaitable. And if it exists, I guess that's going to just be a call to list, right? So that's underscore repository.list archive video. Now this might pull it all into memory. I'm pretty sure. Is that, yeah, that returns a list. That's not an iQueryable. So it's probably not the best way to do this. What's calling this anyway? There. It's not being used in one place. I mean, why wouldn't you just do that here? Because it's going to be null when it comes back from here. So just say if current video entity. Remember, I didn't write this code. This is generated code. If current video entity equals null, it's almost JavaScript code there if I just left it like it was. Is it truthy? Alright, then we'll just return not found there. Right? And then I don't need this code that is probably not very good. And I don't need any of this. And I don't need to try catch it at all because all you're going to do is throw no matter what. So I can get rid of all this code and just rely on my default error handler. Alright, so if there's a problem with the update, it'll throw. Otherwise, it'll do a redirect back to the index. We'll make sure everything works. Go back to my videos. We see a list. We see details. We can change stuff. And we can delete stuff. Everything works. Alright, so I still got a to-do item on that specification, but we're mostly done. We can do a git add dot, git commit, remove db context from most Razor pages, and push. Alright, who is on Twitch right now? We can do a quick raid to those peoples. There's this. Usually Clarkio is online. Let's see if that's the case. I think he's online, but I have to watch an ad to find out. That's annoying. It says he's live, so let's just assume he's online. Alright, so hopefully this was useful for people. There's Clarkio. So he's rocking with 54 people watching and a whole lot more views than I have. Let's go ahead and send him some love. If anybody has any last questions, throw them in the chat real quick. Otherwise, I'm going to go here and look for someone here. Clarkio, and we're going to say raid. Alright, so let me check the chat one last time. DataStax Academy. Is that another person that's live? I don't know that one. What do they talk about? I'll add them to my list of people to check out. Thanks for the stream. You're welcome. Thanks for coming. And those of you that came from Fritz, if this was useful for you, don't forget to follow. I appreciate it. I'm usually here on Fridays, like 12 to 2, which usually should be right after Jeff Fritz is done with his stream. All right, I'm gonna send you over to Clarkio. He's doing some cool stuff, usually with VS Code, JavaScript, and some IoT related things like changing light bulbs and colors and things that you can do live from his chat. But check that out. Andre Mayhem, thanks for this follow. All right, let's do this raid, and I'll jump over to Clarkio for a few minutes and say hi over there. Here we go.